Good evening, welcome back to Golem Telly. I am your host, the magical Mr. E. Now you might have guessed already from the fact that I call my episodes Progs that I'm a 2000 AD fan. Well, it's the galaxy's greatest comic, so yeah, of course I'm a 2000 AD fan. I wasn't there from the very beginning because the comic launched in 1977 when I was just 4 years old. And it was a little bit too graphic, even for me at 4. But I finally got on board in 1988 when I'd just turned 15. Once I discovered the brilliance of 2000 AD, there was no going back. Not only did I start reading the weekly progs, but I also knew that I had to dive into the archives and discover some of the amazing stories that I'd missed up until then. And one of the first stories that I discovered was the V.C.s by Gerry Finley-Day. Now this is how I first experienced the V.C.s. Not in the weekly episodes that had been published in 2000 AD in the late 70s and early 80s, but in 1988 when the entire story was reprinted in 3 consecutive issues of the Best of 2000 AD monthly. This story absolutely blew my mind when I first read it, but I don't think I've returned to it and read it in its entirety since then, so I'm very excited to be taking another look at it tonight. And you can join me. All you got to do is come with me to camera 2, where I will be sticking these 3 issues under the retroscope and zooming in. Okay, suck it in, worms, because here we go. This is the V.C.s from the pages of the Best of 2000 AD monthly, March, April and May 1988, issues 30, 31 and 32 of the Best of 2000 AD monthly. And as you can see, on the front cover of issue 30, we have the V.C.s in full colour. Now, this whole story was drawn in black and white, so we never actually got to see any colour V.C.s action. I don't know if it's sacrilegious to say this, but as much as I love the original black and white story, I would also very much like to see a full colour version. Okay, so I'm going to move these 2 issues out of the way. And let's start off with the first issue. Join the V.C.s. Vapor Space Invader today. Well, vaping back then meant something altogether different. Nowadays, it's something that year 10s do in the toilets at school. But back then, it basically meant to vaporize an alien invader. As you can see happening here, that's what vaping looked like when we were kids. And you can just see here, on this V.C, the name Smith. And Steve Smith, is the main protagonist of this story. He's the raw recruit who, as you're about to see, joins the V.C.s and goes on to become, well, you'll see. Okay, galactic greetings, Earthlets. This month I, Tharg, bring you one of my all-time most popular thrills. Yes, the V.C.s are here. Written by Rogue Trooper writer Gerry Finley-Day. Rogue Trooper. We'll talk about Rogue Trooper in another video. Tonight, it's all about the V.C.s. The V.C.s features the artwork of some of 2000 AD's most famous art droids, Mike McMahon. Everyone calls him Mick McMahon today. I always got a bit confused by that. To me, he was always Mike McMahon. Probably because this was the first time I ever saw his name. And there it is, Mike McMahon. But anyway, Mike McMahon. Mike McMahon only, I think, does maybe the first episode, and then the rest is all shared between Cam Kennedy and Gary Leach. It's a brilliant story. It's kind of been described as Vietnam in space. And of course, there are some pretty obvious references to the Vietnam War. And Gary Leach, sad to say, passed away just a couple of years ago, and he was only in his 60s, I think, so another great artist gone too soon. And here we are. This is where it all begins. Star Troopers, Space Warriors, Geek Killers. Yeah, even in 2531, they labelled the fighting man with their glorified names, but not me, nor my squad. So this is, of course, Steve Smith speaking. As I said before, he's the main protagonist, and he narrates the whole story right through to the end. The war we fought was light years from being glorious, and the enemy we killed were just a fraction less crazed than our commanders. We were the V.C.s. And here you can see the whole crew. There's new recruit Steve Smith, standing right behind Jupe, the leader. On the right-hand side here, we've got Loon and Henshaw. And on the left, Dwarf Star and Ringer. And these characters are all brilliantly fleshed out over the pages that follow. One of the great things about this story is the economy with which it's told. And so much happens in just a few panels. It's really slick storytelling. This is 45 years old now, this story, and in some ways it does show its age, as you might expect. But regardless, it still stands up as a great example of epic storytelling, and it's great fun. Very quickly, you see, within just a couple of panels, the geeks make their appearance, and they start wasting people immediately. And I like the fact that the background of the geeks remains a mystery. We don't really get to find out too much about them, and we don't need to. But suddenly the solar system had become a battleground and people were getting killed again. So yeah, there'd been this time of peace where it seemed as though all wars had come to an end by the mid-2400s. But then from out of nowhere came the geeks and it all became chaos and carnage again. Anyway, you can see what I mean by the economy of the storytelling, because in those 3 panels we've already got all the exposition that we need. And you can see the space battles unfolding. And here we see the arrival of Steve Smith. That's when I signed up, me, Steve Smith. I'd always wanted to join them Star Soldiers, and I sweated my exams and stuck to my training. And this reminds me, even though this appeared years before the film Platoon, Oliver Stone's amazing Vietnam War film, but this reminds me very much of Taylor's arrival in Vietnam. Taylor, played by Charlie Sheen. When Taylor arrives, he is fresh-faced and inexperienced, and all the veteran soldiers don't like him very much because they're just worried he's going to get them all killed. But by the end, of course, he's a changed man. A year in Vietnam has changed him forever. And that's pretty much what happens with Steve Smith here. But as I said, this story was published in 1979 and 1980, and Platoon didn't come out until 1986, so I'm not saying that Platoon got its ideas from the V.C.s, far from it. What I am saying is that the V.C.s deserves a lot of credit for coming up with a lot of these ideas long before others were doing it. So yeah, here's Jupe, Steve Smith's new sergeant, telling the Earthworms to wait because there's a space burial to take place first. And Steve Smith realizes pretty much straight away that he is replacing the guy who's in this coffin. His name was Crick, I think. We'll see in a moment. But again, very much like what happens at the beginning of Platoon, because at the beginning of Platoon, Taylor arrives in Vietnam, and the first thing he sees is a whole row of body bags on stretchers. We're only on page 3 here, and already we've got 2 geek ships warping out of hyperspace. So the action kicks off immediately. And the supply ship that has brought Smith this far has already been destroyed. So you can see how perilous this solar system is, this galaxy. And of course, there's straight away some carnage. These geeks don't last for long. And Jupe and Smith make their way back to the V.C.'s ship. And this is where he gets to meet his new buddies. Jupe's the sergeant, Steve Smith is the new boy, and then you've got Ringer, the pilot, who is from a colony just off Saturn, a Dwarf Star, who has his origins from a colony near Neptune, I think, Henshaw, who's from Mars, and then finally you've got Loon. Loon, he's from the moon. He's spent a lot of time living on the moon, and it's also sent him a little crazy. So Loon by name and Loon by nature. Jupe is from a Jupiter colony, I think. Little mention of Brother for the first time. Brother is the ship's computer. A little bit like Mother, perhaps, from Alien. There may have been a bit of an influence there from Alien. Mother being the ship's computer on, what was it, the Nostromo? And Brother being the ship's computer on the V.C.s ship. But, interestingly, as you'll see, Brother kind of has an avatar. He's not just a voice or a computer interface that you can converse with. He's actually got this kind of 3D avatar. And so in that sense, it reminds me a lot of Holly from Red Dwarf. But again, that was something that didn't really appear on our screens until around a decade later. So fair play to them. Good going. Don't let them get to you, kid. The V.C.s, it's our own name, sort of private joke. Our job's to patrol the system, right? Keep it secure and clean up the geeks till someone works out a strategy, right? So we call ourselves the V.C.s, the vacuum cleaners. And then with issue 1 done, or the first episode done, that was from Prog 140. It was 140, wasn't it? Let's just double check. I had that right? Yeah, Prog 140. And then the next Prog, the art duties switch over to Gary Leach. His art style is very, very different from Mike McMahon's. It's far cleaner, a lot more like Brian Bolland's. I don't want to be unkind here, it's not as good. Sometimes the proportions are a little bit odd, I think, as you can tell here straight away. But what he does really well, what he did really well, was capture facial expressions and dynamic poses. And at first, Steve Smith is looking for ways to prove himself. He desperately wants to show the other 5 guys that he can hold his own, that he can be a V.C. At the beginning, he is denied these chances, like here, for instance, he has to guard the hatch rather than follow Dupe into action. And he gets frustrated and he ends up making mistakes. So he thinks he's got an opportunity here to kill a geek, but when he does so, what he doesn't realize is that this is a special kind of geek that's like an egg layer. And the moment he shoots it, it lays thousands of eggs. And as you can see, the rest of the crew are not very happy with him. And now, at this point, issue 3, or episode 3 from Prog 142, I guess, this is where Cam Kennedy takes over the art. Cam Kennedy, of course, who would also go on to work on Rogue Trooper. Steve Smith is desperately trying to prove himself, this time only managing to upset Dwarf Star. So here, Steve Smith notices that these escape pods have been launched from what they thought was a destroyed geek ship, and they're heading down to the planet's surface. And he tries to warn the others, but they don't believe him. Ringer, who's not interested, he just says, "More geeks dropping onto Pluto, that's space dust, Smith. What you saw were bits of debris, so scram." Smith's on his own. "Damn V.C.s, this time they're wrong. They want me out of the way, and I'm going to do just that." And he suits up, and he's going to drop down to the Pluto surface. And this, he thinks, is where he's going to prove himself to the V.C.s. Smith does turn out to be quite helpful here. And the 3 guys down on the planet's surface do manage to cooperate and work well together. And then you can see the 3 guys. So Smith's beginning to make his way and win the admiration and the approval of some of the others. Dupe and I think Henshaw are the crew members that are most welcoming to him. And by the last panel, we can see he goes, "I've felt my first bit of comradeship with these vacuum cleaners." And then we got Gary Leach back on duty, and this is Brother. And he starts off looking like a jester, and I'm not sure why he's got this jester design, but anyway. But that is all about to change, because they're going through this electrical storm. And it causes some damage to the ship, and fries some of Brother's circuits. And he has to self-repair for a while. And when he's finished his repairs, he's a changed man. In the meantime, you can see Loon going a little bit crazy, covering himself in paint and trying to attack and kill Steve Smith. But luckily, Steve Smith is saved by a rifle butt to Loon's head. I love these sound effects. That is the sound that a rifle butt makes when it collides with someone's head. Blat. When Brother logs on again, he speaks like a hippie, basically. Say, do you have a cigarette? Yeah, and he kind of keeps that up for the entire rest of the story. Brother. Hey, brother. Steve Smith actually knocks up a replacement outfit for him so that he looks the part now that he speaks like a groovy hippie. And there's a little bit of friction between them. There's Jupe saying, suck it in. I love that. That's a great expression. Suck it in. I said suck it in and that's an order. Okay, man, but stay cool. So yeah, we find out a little bit about Dwarf Star's background, and we learn that he and his twin brother were mutated by some radiation near Neptune. So here in this episode, after all this fighting they've been doing throughout different parts of the solar system, they now get to Mars, and this is Phobos Harbor. And it's now, in 2431, the biggest Star Trooper base in the system, and that's Mars. So before we get down to the planet's surface, there's this big meeting that takes place on Phobos Harbor. And we are introduced to a couple of new characters. We've got the controller, who's a cyborg. He's a good guy. But this guy isn't. This is one of the dishwashers. And the dishwashers are the kind of slimy, political, ruling class who are in charge of pretty much everything. They make all the decisions, but they don't really always act in the best interests of the fleet or the Star Troopers. They're pretty much only in it for themselves. We hated him and he knew it. As soon as he walked in, everyone sat down without waiting for the word. Hell no, not a dishwasher. And yeah, they're kind of slimy characters, these dishwashers. They get a chance to head down to Mars for a bit of R&R. And this is where we see how Mars has become a Chinese colony. And it's all built into this dormant volcano, Olympus Mons, which is, as far as I'm aware, the biggest mountain in the solar system. I think Olympus Mons is something like 3 times the height of Mount Everest. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Inside this volcano, this dormant volcano, they've built a massive new city called New Peking City, a massive dome colony built into the extinct volcano of Olympus Mons. And they're going to head down there to get drunk. And they're fighting it out, but while they're fighting it out down on the planet's surface and getting into all these scraps, it turns out that there's a geek invasion taking place. And this is where Olympus Mons gets obliterated. And of course, being Hensho's home world, it's going to affect him pretty badly. Hensho wore his usual inscrutable face, but we could see he was suffering. No one spoke, but we all had the same thought. Mars was dead. The geeks were everywhere, and we were trapped. And that's it for 2000 AD, Best of 2000 AD, issue 30. So straight on to issue 31. Okay, issue 31, and it's a great picture of Dredd on the front. Okay. So the V.C.s continue their epic Super Narmin space saga. We're getting the V.C.s from Prog's 153 to 159, and then a Robotale, and then a Judge Dredd story, and then the V.C.s. Now that's a typo, definitely. It's not 180 to 184 because the V.C.s only ran until something like Prog 175, that initial run of the V.C.s. So that, I think, must mean Prog's 160 to 164. Yeah, I'm sure of that. They're stranded on the surface of Mars, and there are geeks everywhere. And they're thinking that they're done for, but fortunately, Jupe reveals that he is not dead after all, and they learn that he had a gut feeling that there was going to be an attack, and so he hid on another of the Mars moons. Every major city on Mars gone to. One gigantic massacre. And I tell you something, it's not going to be the last gigantic massacre. Having dealt with Mars, the geeks are going to be heading for the next planet. Now, which planet that's going to be, they don't know yet, but it's probably Earth, isn't it? And Gary Leach, here we go again. See, yeah, I'm in two minds about Gary Leach's artwork. Now, on the one hand, the dynamic stuff is amazing, and some of the facial expressions are great, but sometimes the proportions just seem a little bit not quite right. Anyway, who am I to judge? What do I know? I only got a C for my art A level. Okay, so they are heading for Earth, and we are shown Transatlantic City, this amazing floating city built in 2400. The Transatlantic City was a huge floating civilization connecting the Americas with Europe. It was known as the 10th wonder of the world. Now, I'm no structural engineer, but I have a feeling there would be some problems in making such a city viable. And this is the home of Steve Smith's parents, his family, and he gets a chance to talk to his mum and dad. And they're not particularly impressive people. They're a little bit rude. We soon realise that the geeks are going to be targeting Transatlantic City, and it isn't long before Transatlantic City is nuked, and with it, Steve Smith's family. At which point, he understandably snaps, and he decides he's not going to take any more of Ringer's insults. And so they have a little bit of fisticuffs. This is great. See what I mean? These images are superb. This is what Gary Leach did best. And by this final panel, you can see that he's been through so much that he is now a V.C. I'm a hard veteran now. I'm going to find the geek galaxy, rip back the mat, and wipe that filth out. Now we're introduced to this dishwasher, and he becomes the main dishwasher. So they jump to the geeks' solar system, I think. They go through hyperspace, and they emerge in this new solar system with these two suns, twin suns with a blinding light. And battle commences here. And it's hard for them to get anywhere at first because they're dazzled by the light of the two suns. But eventually they manage to make some headway. And then they find their way down to this planet's surface. And they think that it's the geek homeworld, as I recall. And they then find out that it's not. It's a dummy. It's a decoy planet. And all these geeks emerge, and they're in trouble. The soldiers that have been sent down to this geek homeworld, they are very raw recruits. And the dishwasher's like, nah, they're not worth saving. Let them fend for themselves down there. And if they die, they die. But, you know, the V.C.s aren't going to allow that to happen. Of course not. They hatch a plan. They have been told that in no circumstances are they allowed to head down to the planet. Even the opening of the airlock will be considered a court-martial offence. But they realise that he only said airlock. He didn't say anything about missile tubes. So they come up with this plan to be fired out of Henshaw's missile tubes, two of them, Steve Smith and Jupe, so that they can head down to the planet and provide some leadership for the beleaguered young troopers who are out of their depth. And away they go through the missile tubes, and they do help. They manage to turn these soldiers into a proper fighting force, but as the episode here ends, Smith is remembering that Ringer, who hates him, made it very, very clear that nothing better happened to Jupe on account of his crazy idea, because it was Steve Smith's idea to head down there in the missile tubes. Now at this point, the other guys have arrived. They've followed Jupe and Smith down to the planet's surface, and Jupe is just being super heroic here, and they're going, "Come on, Sarge, the boys have landed. Hurry up, or the glare of those suns will get you." And Jupe, of course, just can't stop himself. He's like, okay, just one last blast for those murdering filth. One blast too many, though, because as we find out at the bottom of this page, he stayed there in the glare of the sun for too long, and he has been blinded. So, Ringer is furious with Steve Smith for getting their sergeant blinded, and Steve Smith knows he's made a boo-boo here. I've let them down, I've destroyed Jupe, we've lost our leader. It gets worse. Ringer's giving Smith some evils, and Jupe is out of action, but he's still happy to tell Smith to suck it in. Ringer and Steve Smith carry on fighting with each other, and the fight continues outside the spaceship, and they are both starved of oxygen for a few moments, so that they pass out and they're brought back on board, only to be told that the penalty for fighting on active duty is death. Seems a bit harsh. But they're given an option. You can either die now, be executed now, or go on a very, very dangerous mission. And it turns out that they have discovered a way to make really convincing geek disguises. So they can dress up as geeks and even smell like them, and infiltrate the geek homeworlds or strongholds and use that as a tactical advantage. But it's very, very dangerous, of course. I like this bit. Jupe, of course, can't see, but he's still their sergeant, and he orders Ringer and Steve Smith to patch it up, to stop arguing, and to shake hands. But as he shakes hands with Steve Smith, Smith realizes that Ringer's got a razor blade between his fingers, and he's actually cutting his hand. But he doesn't say anything. And Jupe's happy because he thinks they're patching up their arguments and being friends again, but what he doesn't realize is that Steve Smith is just keeping quiet so as not to worry Jupe. But that feud is clearly far from over. No sooner have they got their costumes on, their disguises, than Ringer is captured by the geeks and they start to torture him. And so obviously it's an opportunity for Steve Smith to save his neck, which he does, and Ringer reckons they're even at this point. And it's not long before they catch Ringer again, so he's not done a very good job of staying hidden. See how they're torturing him and about to kill him in geek style. But Steve Smith does come to his rescue. There he is in the geek disguise, and they take the geek captain hostage so that they can escape together. But as you can see, the foul treatment that Ringer has experienced has caused him to snap, and he is never the same from this point onwards. He's kind of gone mad. So one by one, these guys are biting the dust. Jupe's gone blind, Ringer's got PTSD, and Henshow's lost his home planet. The dishwasher orders them to continue infiltrating these geek strongholds. So this is the last of the 3 issues of the Best of 2000 AD Monthly to feature the V.C.s, May 1988. And what an image. That's Brian Bolland, isn't it? Yeah, there we go. I mean, that's a classic Dread picture, isn't it? They are made to ride ahead of the rest of the fleet. This is a geek base, and it reminds me of the docking slot in the space stations in Elite. Remember Acorn Soft's Elite on the BBC Micro? Where you had to rotate your ship and try and dock with it, and I could never do it. There's a lot more action and fighting, but the upshot of this particular skirmish is that Dwarf Star is killed. Rest in peace, Dwarf Star. Smith is furious. He decides that he is going to assassinate the dishwasher, and he comes up with his plan to use an assassin's needle gun, but he realizes that if he tries to assassinate the dishwasher, he's going to get killed by this guard globe. So he backs down, but then he realizes that Hensho is going to do just what he was going to do. So to save Hensho, he gives him a nerve blow, a punch in the back to paralyze him momentarily. And the dishwasher lives. But they do eventually make their way to the geek homeworld. And we're getting towards the big finale here. So, sadly, Hensho sacrifices himself at this point in order to save Smith. And I think it's Loon, isn't it? Yeah, it's Loon. And these guys head down to the surface of this moon just above the geek's homeworld. And for a moment, Steve Smith thinks that he's saved Loon, but it's not to be. Loon ends up sacrificing himself. That's all that's left of him. Damn. Not a very nice way to go. By that point, there are very few of them left. You've got Steve Smith, who's down on the planet, Jupe, who is blind, and Ringer, who is shell-shocked, but Dwarf Star and Loon and Henshaw are all gone. So it's all unraveling fast here. The geeks now have their own plan, which is very similar to what the dishwasher had come up with on the other side, and that is to use lookalikes or use costumes, disguises, so that some geeks can infiltrate the human flagship and bring about the destruction of the Star Troopers fleet. But as he's still alive, Steve Smith manages to find a way to infiltrate that group. It gets a little bit messy here, actually, and comes up with a plan on the spot to save the day. But he needs Jupe and Ringer, the state they're in. I think the artist by this point has changed. Hold on, who's the artist here? Yeah, John Richardson. So for the final few episodes, John Richardson takes over. And John Richardson's art, I don't know how much other artwork he did. I get the feeling it's not much. But there are certainly some points where his art is almost indistinguishable from Cam Kennedy's, I guess. But there are occasional moments where it falls a bit short of that. But still not bad at all. And he did a fine job of wrapping things up for this story. And Smith takes a couple of blasts and thinks that's it, and he's failed the V.C.s and the human race, but realizes the next episode that he is actually still alive. That burst of las bolts burnt me pretty badly, but I'm still kicking. It reminds me of Austin Powers when Will Ferrell's character, it's Mustafa, isn't it? he's sent plummeting to his apparent death, only to be still audible through the vent. And you can hear him saying, "I'm still alive, I'm just very badly burned." A few more heroics still required, and then this sort of ragged trio of Smith, who is badly wounded, and Jupe, who is blind, and Ringer, who is not the man he once was. They have to make their way through to where the geeks are so they can take them down. And you can see the geeks have the dishwasher where they want him. Jupe comes up with a cunning plan to turn off all the lights in the ship, all the electricity, so that they can temporarily stop the geeks from transmitting their final message that would signal the end of the Starfleet. And if that happens, it's going to be the biggest slaughter the galaxy's ever seen. And we've seen some big slaughters already, haven't we? But they managed to do it. They turn out the lights, and there's a final showdown here. There's still time for one more V.C. death. Ironically, right at the end here, Ringer sacrifices himself to save Steve Smith. He sends off one of these kill discs. He's a whiz with a kill disc. But before it can take down the dishwasher in this final confrontation, he is shot by the dishwasher. And that's it. That's it for Ringer. Now he's a dead Ringer. Fancy me doing a fool thing like saving a worm. At least you were a V.C., Smith. It's now down to Jupe and Steve Smith and General Moore, who now becomes the new commander. The story ends with a massive battle. It's all over pretty quickly, actually. And Steve Smith at this point is struggling to stay conscious. But the ghosts of his fallen comrades appear. A bit like Obi-Wan Kenobi's voice, I suppose. Maybe a little bit of a Star Wars influence there, perhaps. Maybe not, I don't know. And this space battle unfolds, and it ends with victory for the human race. And by this point, the soldiers are now much stronger than they were before, thanks to the guidance of Jupe and Smith earlier on in the story. And there's a kind of a silly ending here, actually. So they find out at the last moment here that the dishwasher was wearing a ring that was basically recording everything that was going on. And if it is played, if this hologram is played, then it's going to reveal that that dishwasher was killed by Ringer and Jupe and Steve Smith. And so the blinded Jupe basically grabs one of these vacuum cleaners that was being used over here by some of the geeks who've now surrendered, and they were cleaning the red carpet with them, with these vacuum cleaners. So they were there getting the red carpet ready for their new leaders, their new human masters. And Jupe, the blinded Jupe, grabs one of the vacuum cleaners and just in the nick of time hoovers up the signet ring, so they never get to hear the truth about what happened. And General Moore, he steps in and says, "It's all right, sir, I can complete the message for you. The hologram was about to say that Smith should be rewarded for his gallant service to the fleet. I therefore recommend him for promotion." So that's it. That's where it ends. Steve Smith's story arc is complete. He's gone from being an inexperienced rookie to being a decorated hero. I sucked in hard when I saw the promotion bars of a second lieutenant. Now I've got a new crew to form, maybe new wars to fight, but I'm never gonna wipe away the memory of those first V.C.s, the vacuum cleaners. And there they are, looking on, his buddies, who were never very nice to him, not really. Ringer turned out okay in the end. Henshaw, who gave his life to save Steve Smith. Loon, who got himself killed for no good reason, and Dwarf Star, the V.C.s. Okay, folks, that's it. We are done. That was the V.C.s from the pages of the best of 2000 AD monthly, March, April, and May 1988. What a story. How cool was that? The V.C.s by Gerry Finley-Day from the pages of the best of 2000 AD monthly. Thank you so much for joining me again this evening. I really appreciate it. If you could like the video and share it, amazing. If you could subscribe to my channel, Golem Telly, incredible. And while you're at it, why not hit the bell for notifications so that you don't miss any of my future videos. There are loads more on the way. Please enjoy the rest of your evening, and I will see you again very soon.
Evening shadows deep.